Hi, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. We're doing the shows right now during the high holidays on Sundays, and instead of Wednesday, because this Wednesday coming up is going to be Yom Kippur, so there's no way we could do a show on Yom Kippur. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm going to ask everyone who's joining us if you could please share this, share the link uh, on your Facebook pages with the various groups you're part of, or pages that you're part of, or other social media platforms that you're part of. We'll appreciate it. We'll reach a lot more people and have a stronger impact. There's a lot going on right now, a lot to discuss. It's a phone in as well. You can call in, not quite yet, but you can call in if you have any comments, questions. The number is 647 510 5535. So, like I said, Yom Kippur is only in a few days, and it's a time for reflection. And when we go to shul, Uh, there's a lot of praying. You're in shul for almost the whole day, davening and fasting, praying and fasting, and reflecting on the previous year. And we stand before God, and we're supposed to give an accounting of ourselves and plead for forgiveness for our shortcomings. And obviously, no one is off the hook, and there's a lot to reflect on. There's a lot of anti Semitism out there, there's a lot of attacks against Israel. Uh, the question is, where are you? What are you doing? Are you helping? Or are you turning a blind eye? Well, we can't turn a blind eye. Everyone counts. Everyone counts. This past week, 6 Islamic terrorists escaped from an Israeli prison. There's a lot of questions exactly how that happened in a high security prison. They said that a guard or guards fell asleep while it was going on, which is unbelievable. And obviously, that has to be rectified. And that's a matter that Israel's security has to deal with. And you have to have the right people in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. But Israel was successful in recapturing 4 of the 6. Now, one of the terrorists, and we're going to be talking about this particular terrorist quite a bit on the show, Zakaria Zabidi. Zakaria Zabidi, and what's this got to do with Yom Kippur? It's got a lot to do with it. Zakaria Zabidi, uh, one of the important functions that he served in the Al Aqsa terrorist organization and Islamic Jihad as well was to recruit children. You know, we've been showing a lot of tapes before regarding Hamas training camps where they're training children to be terrorists, to kill Jews, raised on hate. Well, this particular terrorist recruited children to become suicide bombers. Can you imagine? We're going to be showing a lot of stuff about that. But what it's got to do with Yom Kippur? A Jewish girl from Israel, Teli Fahima, peace activists, like the type you see from Jewish Voices for Peace, and if not now, BDS groups that join forces with all the different radical Islamic BDS groups that want the destruction of Israel. Teli Fahima married Zakaria Zabidi, and she was arrested, in fact, as well, because she was conspiring with him to commit acts of terrorism. Could you imagine? This is no game when Israel faces serious threats of terrorism, and you have Jews, not many, but you have Jews joining those who wish for the destruction of Israel and engaging in acts of terrorism and supporting the recruitment of children to become suicide bombers. And so we have been monitoring various groups here in Canada as well. You have the independent Jewish Voices joining with the Palestinian student movement. And they're pro Intifada, and they make it very clear. And they think that these terrorists who escaped are heroes. Heroes? Those who recruit children to be suicide bombers? Well, before we really get into it, like I said, Israel caught 6 of them. Israel caught 4 of them. And they say the other 2, it's a matter of days, they'll have them. They'll have them, and Israel, as the Jewish state, will have to do what it's got to do. Unfortunately, there are Arabs in Israel that also view these terrorists as heroes. So like I said, we're going to be showing more information about these suicide bombers that were recruited by Zakaria Zabidi. We'll do that, and we have some information we'll show. But first, a little bit of good news. Israel got 4 of them. They were successful. We have a little clip to show how you get terrorists. It's very good to show. Maybe our doctor in the studio could show it to lighten the mood a little bit.
I can. I'll lighten the mood a little bit with a couple of quick clips we have, and we'll bring up the first one, which just, I think, says a lot.
Yes.
Let's see.
Very important video.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Well, we'll leave that for now, and then when you're ready, I'll show another one, which is just as enjoyable.
Okay. Why don't we show it?
Okay.
Let's do it.
Right up. And then I think we could show from the law group in Canada, that little 5-minute clip, kind of talking more about it. Or we could actually, I think it's a good time to talk about the fact that these are not activists. These are basically hardened terrorists. So I think
Absolutely.
It's a good moment to talk about that for a moment. So let me bring that up for you.
Israel in chaos right now after 6 Palestinian terrorists escaped from the Gilboa prison.
Palestinian activists are elated and seem to have conveniently forgotten that each of these terrorists is serving a life sentence
for murder of civilians.
For example, one of them kidnapped and murdered an 18-year-old civilian.
Another, Zakaria Zabidi, killed these 6 Israeli civilians at a polling station during Israeli election.
He also recruited a 14-year-old Palestinian to be a suicide bomber in 2004, and that's just a few of his attacks.
Nice guy, huh?
But instead of condemning the violence, which actually harms the Palestinian cause, these activists are actually praising it.
Muhammad al-Qud and Miriam Barghouti are calling these murders political prisoners.
Noura Erakat is celebrating their escape and calling for all Palestinian terrorists to be released.
And the Director of Physicians for Human Rights, yes, it's not a joke, is defending terrorists and calling the murder of civilians freedom fighting.
In case these activists haven't learned anything in the past 70 years, terrorism won't free Palestine. It won't even help Palestinians. Every time there is an increase in terrorism against Israel, it's Palestinians who suffer more as a result of crackdown on activity, revoking permits, limiting trade due to security, or other reasons.
So before you try to defend the indefensible, maybe you need to think about what being a pro-Palestinian actually means.
If you want to support Palestinians, whitewashing terrorism definitely isn't the answer.
Get it?
We also have a case of so-called Rabbi David Mavusser, who's with the Independent Jewish Voices. He's been busy on Twitter lately. He's got a long history. He was charged with pouring red paint on the steps leading to the Israeli consulate in Toronto a few months ago. But on Twitter recently, the other day, he tweets out, human rights groups have long condemned what they say amounts to a shoot-to-kill policy used by Israel against scores of Palestinians in recent years. In many cases, occupation forces fail to provide Palestinians with first aid after they've been shot. Now, he's referring to there is a doctor, terrorist, who tried to kill an Israeli soldier. He was lunging at him, running at him to stab him to death, and Israeli soldiers shot him. Shot this doctor terrorist. Defending him? Really? So on Yom Kippur, we have a lot to reflect about. We have those in our midst, in our community, that defend these terrorists and call them heroes. We need change in our community. We can't coddle them. We certainly can't allow them to come into Jewish community institutions and be part of the community because they have crossed over a red line and have gone on the side of those who, can you get any worse than supporting people and calling them heroes, those who brainwash children to become suicide bombers? How much worse is there? We have a clip we're going to be showing detailing this.
I think, Meir, while we're still talking about the doctor who is being praised as a martyr, I think what's interesting to just bring up is the fact that this is just a brief sampling all over social media, how he was a medical doctor. Well, that's true. He's a medical doctor. It's called leaving out minor details. They seem to leave the minor detail out, that when he was shot dead, he was lunging and trying to stab and kill a police officer. What should the penalty be in any country on the planet, particularly democracy, where someone tries to kill a police officer? So I think that this is worthy of showing for those who haven't seen. This is him. This is the good doctor strolling, hiding under the bag in his hand a sharp, long butcher knife. It's not a little martial arts knife. So he drops the bag and there he goes. He lunges for the police officer. Are you kidding me? They forgot to mention this in social media. And there he is. At first, they don't shoot him, but they don't have much of a choice because six police are approaching him. He's still lunging with his knife. And then they said that they just left him to die. Well, sorry about that. That's what happens when you try to assassinate a police officer.
Absolutely. And if that's not the case, then you have no law and order. Then society cannot go on, and Israeli society will not be able to go on. And to consider these people to be heroes, these terrorists, especially these six that escaped, we do have a clip. I'm not sure what order our doctor in the studio has it, but we do have a clip from the lawyer who represents the Lawfare Project that talks about this, Zakaria Zabidi. And it's just really shocking because she actually interviewed him. And this is remarkable. Brooke Goldstein. It's remarkable what she has to say about this. And she actually made a documentary, I think maybe about 10 years ago, on this particular subject. And it comes right back. So she knows all about it. She knows who this character is.
So when you're ready, I'll be glad to bring it on up.
We're ready. And also, it's on the screen. You can go to our website. Please donate also because there's a lot of work. We're going to be rolling up our sleeves. Now, the Independent Jewish Voices and the Palestinian Youth Movement, they're having a meeting in the next day or so to recruit people on campuses. Now, if this is their position that these are heroes, it's going to be hell on campus for Jews, for Jewish students. The incitement is going to be really up there. So join us, support us, because we want to stop their plans. We want to stop their plans. Also, you can call up tonight and give us questions, concerns. The number is on the screen, 647-510-5535. But we have a lot of work. We're not just going to synagogue, this Yom Kippur and just going to meditate and everything just carries on from there. No. We look back at what we did, and there's a lot of accomplishments we did in the previous year. And we have a lot that we're going to do this year. We're going to raise the bar higher. We're recruiting people. We got great people with us, great staff, got a lot of work to do. Join us and let's do it. Let's put the BDS out of commission. But join us. Reflect on it, Yom Kippur.
You mentioned those progressive Jewish groups. They're opposed to defining anti-Semitism, and they reject the concept that if you hate Israel and you hate our heritage, that that they don't have any problem with that. I mean, this just shows you the groups that reject the definition. Look who they link together with. I mean, you got these so-called Jewish groups and influential to our children who get together with Human Rights Watch, with World for Youth. It's just mind-boggling that their influence on the children, and we need to stand up and have.
And there's a recent study that came out, very recent, that according to this particular study, we'll show it in the next show, that Jewish students, they're facing a lot of discrimination from anti-Israel professors. And that has to be exposed. And we have various groups for these professors on campus that are into this incitement against Jews. So they have to be exposed. They have to be confronted. And we will do that going forward in the next year.
For more insight into the story, we now welcome Brooke Goldstein, co-producer of that documentary, The Making of the Martyr, and executive director of the Lawfare Project. Brooke, thank you so much for joining us on this day. So, as we just heard there, Zakaria El-Zabadi is one of 6 terrorists on the run. You had a rare opportunity to interview him years ago. One is struck by the ease with which he describes killing people. Talk us through his state of mind at that time when you met him.
So you said it perfectly. I mean, he just sat there in front of the camera and described to us with absolutely no qualms whatsoever how he intentionally recruits innocent Palestinian children to become suicide homicide bombers. In fact, the Al-Aqsa Brigades, another faction as well, after we did that interview, gave us a block of hash, which was the same hash that they use to give to children before they go on suicide homicide attacks, so that they are not of the state of mind to understand what is happening. Now, I just want to comment on what the guest before me just said, that these Palestinian prisoners are heroes. Baby is personally responsible for recruiting over 16 Palestinian children, strapping bombs on them, and some of them blowing them up by remote control. So if the Palestinians, and I do not think they do, but according to this guest, if they revere a murderer of their own children, what does that say about the society? In fact, Zakaria himself is a product of UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency school, amongst other things that happened in his past that radicalized him. But the UNRWA school specifically teaches innocent Palestinian children to commit acts of terror and thus ruin their chances for normalcy and a normal future, and indoctrinates them towards violence.
So talk to us about his insights at the time about exactly that. How did he justify suicide attacks when he spoke to you, taking innocent lives of Israeli civilians? Tell us more.
Well, it's a poignant question, and especially in light of the clip that you just played, which is where Zakaria was explaining to us, in fact, he was justifying how he recruited children. He said, as you saw in the clip, that they come to him, and they come to him willingly, and they ask him 3 or 4 or 5 times, and if he didn't give them a bomb, they would just use a knife instead, or so he claims. But what he is really saying is that the level of indoctrination that is targeting innocent Palestinian children, whether it's from their political leaders, their media, as you just saw, their religious leaders, their school textbooks, television programs, you name it. These children are being taught that the greatest thing that they should aspire to is to become a suicide homicide bomber, is to become someone like Zachariah Zubeidi, who spends his life killing innocent people. And when we interviewed Zachariah, after the interview, he took us for a walk in the streets of Jenin, and it was very clear, as you see here, children were giving him high fives, coming up to him. He is a hero to them. And this is a systemic problem that has to be changed. You're not going to have peace in the Middle East with Oslo Accords and handshakes. You're going to have peace when children, innocent Muslim children, are not being targeted and taught violence is the solution.
Your thoughts to that exact point, Brooks, about a man like this being on the run. How worried should Israel be, not only about future attacks by this group, but also the impact of this breakout on other terror groups, even lone wolf attacks? Your insights.
Well, of course, there's always a worry when you're in Israel about terrorism. But I think what is even more concerning is what seems to be the highest level of negligence of the Israeli prison authorities to house these top-level terrorists with what I read this morning was a Northern Guard tower that had been unmanned for months. When I first heard of the story, I thought it was a joke. I mean, what is this, the Shawshank Redemption? How is it that these terrorists with blood on their hands are escaping from Israeli prisons? This is what worries me the most.
Well, in a new development on that exact point, we now know that a commission is going to be set up to look into exactly that. As you say, a lot of unanswered questions. We appreciate your insights into this developing situation. Brooke Goldstein, Executive Director of the Lawfare Project and co-producer of the documentary, The Making of the Martyr. Thank you so much for joining us on this day and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
So like I said before, BDS groups revere these terrorists. So one particular organization, Palestinian Youth Movement, that rallies they call for an intifada. They support the intifada. And in a recent tweet from the Palestinian Youth Movement, they say, calling all students in Canada, join Independent Jewish Voices Canada next week to get the rundown on organizing on campus. Can you imagine? Let's organize on campus. Let's have groups on campus to support, to revere these terrorists, to revere these people who recruit children and then drug them up on hash and strap bombs to them to kill Jews. Now, we do have a little clip to show right now of a kid that we're going to show this. You watch it. A kid with bombs strapped to him.
And just so everybody knows, this is basically the trailer to the actual documentary. It gives a little a glimpse into it. And so we'll put that on right now.
كيف اجت هاي الفكرة؟ مين اجى قلنا عن هذا الشيء؟ مين قلنا عن اعتماد هذا الشيء؟ صاحب ناصر. هل شغال الجنة قلت له ما صح الله سلمنا شوي بعدين لبسونا الحساب طبعا قالوا لك تعمل بالحساب وغير أخذونا على المخصوم وصلوني قال لي في 3 جنود بكونوا واقفين
نط عليهم فجر حالة. رحت على المخزون ووقفت استنى دوري لا يجي مشان كبير هيك يعني ترددت شوي فكيت البطارية رحت رفعت ايدي ساعتها ياخذ مني.
مش كان عمرك متى؟
كان عمري 15 سنة.
تقول لي ليش فكرت تسوي عملية زي هذه؟
عشان الناس.
عشان النار؟
الناس بحبونيش.
الناس ما بحبوك هذا السبب؟ وفكرت برضه تطلع بلا عن جنة قلت لي ليش شو كان بدك تسوي في الجنة؟
قاعد.
وايش تسوي هناك؟
انبسط.
Wow. What do they want? It's been since Israel came into being in 1948. We're in the year 2021. In 47, Israel accepted the partition plan. The Arabs turned it down, went to war. They went to war from then till today. There's a little bit of hope. There's the Abraham Accords. There are some countries, Arab countries, Islamic countries, making peace with Israel. Peace for peace. Getting along. The ambassador of Bahrain, in fact, sent out a tweet today saying that he spent this past Shabbat in Israel, and he really enjoyed himself, and it was terrific. And he acknowledged that that was the first Shabbat of the new year, new Jewish year. And moving forward, Jews in Israel are going to be keeping the Shemitah laws. And he understands what that is about, and that's a serious testimony of Jewish faith, keeping the Shemitah in Israel, the laws of letting the land rest every 7 years. So there are some bright spots there that you do have countries like Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, and others that are making peace with Israel, but you still have the BDS / Hamas / Iran plan to try to destroy Israel and to keep the war going on. There is nothing peaceful about the message of the BDS. And again, I reiterate this, and I'm going to continue to reiterate this. And this will be our message for university presidents as well, as we try to dismantle the BDS on campus, that they revere, and they're public about it, they revere those who recruit children to be suicide bombers. Now, this calls into question also UNRWA, what they're teaching. They're teaching anti-Semitism and hate, because as Brooke Goldstein pointed out, that Zakaria Zabidi is a product of education in an UNRWA facility, educational facility. UNICEF as well, that's supposed to have the interests of children at heart, is completely silent about the training camps run by Hamas to recruit children, again, to kill Jews. When Israel recaptured these 4 terrorists, 4 out of the 6, Hamas started firing rockets into Israel. There's no peace with them. There's no live and let live. There's no let's build some kind of economic relations Not at all. The goal remains the destruction of Israel. If you talk to anyone from the BDS and you get into a conversation with them, there is no conversation because they want Israel destroyed, period. And so, what I mentioned earlier, that Tele Fahima, an Israeli Jewish woman, young woman, actually married Zakaria Zabidi and assisted in terrorism with him, and she was thrown in jail as well. She represents the same spirit of these Jews that joined the BDS groups, the same goal, the same anti Semitism, the same accusations. This Rabbi David Mavasser, when he tweets out that since the days of Abraham, so called responsibility for Jews of the Nakba way back then, or that's the roots of when the Nakba began. And he says, because Abraham sent Ishmael out, he leaves out an important part that Ishmael was trying to kill his brother repeatedly. And therefore, the message is go. If that's what you want to do, you can't live here. Separation. As the foreign minister of Israel says, it's got to be separation between those who call themselves Palestinians and the state of Israel. Because those who want the annihilation of Israel cannot live in Israel. It doesn't work. Now, with access to social media, I'm hoping that Jews in Israel and also people who are not Jewish who live in Israel, who support Israel, that they will document those who are those Islamic supporters of these terrorists who hail them as heroes, who are out on the streets and very vocal and inciting violence as well, that people in Israel will document who they are and whether they have positions, any of them, positions of authority on campus or in businesses, and where they work and who they are. People need to know who they are. And that goes for here too. We need to know who's involved with these organizations that worship these terrorists. And as we go forward into the new year, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. We have to do it. We have no choice. It's either to turn a blind eye or to face it and stare it down and get the information. Thank God we have good people, but we need more. We need more good people in every single city in North America to do this job. We have to do it. We have to be relentless. The number on the screen, 647-510-5535. Call if you have any questions, comments. But this is extremely serious. Now let's just see. Got some information here on the other computer. No, we sent out some information regarding the Palestinian youth movement with a lot of different links of who they're involved with, what they stand for. It's very striking that they're promoting the Independent Jewish Voices campaign to recruit students on campuses, not one campus, on many campuses. So, I mean, we have to be on top of that. Where are major Jewish organizations when it comes to this, like CEJA? And I don't really like, the show isn't dedicated to bashing these organizations, but let me just tell you, if you call them and you report it, they'll write it down. They're not going to do too much. about it, unfortunately, and that's one of the reasons why we exist, because there seems to be a vacuum of leadership out there. There's serious problems. And one other issue is that former CEO of the Canadian Jewish Congress, which evolved and become CJA, Bernie Farber, is that, I see on his social media page, Facebook, he's got friends that they identify with the independent Jewish voices. And you can't give the independent Jewish voices a pass in the community. And Bernie Farber was one of the presenters of the emergency summit on anti-Semitism in Ottawa. And if you're going to turn a blind eye to the independent Jewish voices, all the connections that they have in the BDS movement, then you're not doing a service to the Jewish community, and you shouldn't be in Ottawa trying to represent the community on an issue of anti-Semitism. I should be, not him. Not him, because I'll call it the BDS. Now, Bernie used to call it the BDS. Used to, when he was with the Canadian Jewish Congress. Now, I have no idea why he doesn't. I don't know what happened to him or anything, but it's almost irrelevant, because the threat of the BDS, of BDS anti-Semitism, is there. And again, these BDS groups, so here he is, he's with the board member from one of the largest BDS organizations, CJPME. He's with Aziza Kunji. She's a lawyer with that group. I think he calls her human rights activists or something like that. And, it's her right. She wants to associate with the BDS and promote the BDS. Okay, but we have to speak up and say what the BDS is to the Jewish community. And when the BDS is going out, hailing these people as heroes, those who are brainwashing children to strap bombs to their bodies and become suicide bombers, that's pretty far. So they got to be called out. And BDS, we have to call them out. If they're going to be recruiting on campus, we have to oppose that. Because God forbid what could happen. If you think this is a great thing to recruit children like that, it's not good. We got a call coming in. Yes, sir. Can I help you? Or ma'am?
It's Sam Fishman from Calgary.
How you doing, Sam?
Good, thank you. Is there no way they can ban BDS and any of the education institutions, that they ban these organizations from the universities, that politics shouldn't be part of the education?
Well,
these people are going to school.
Right. We're certainly working on that angle. We want to have them banned from campus. There's no question about it. And we want to have professors who are teaching anti-Semitism through the BDS on campus and intimidating Jewish students. We want them to be fired, canned, out. So we're working in that direction as well. Definitely. We have to do it. We have to do it.
It's got to be, because where can somebody's safety going to a university or to school be where you don't have to have your back turned?
Exactly. So
anyway, thanks again, and Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Thank you very much, Sam, for calling. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Also, so I'm encouraging people to call our show. I'm also encouraging you, please make a donation to Israel Now. We need it. We need the funds. We spend it wisely. There's a lot of work to do. We're the group that will roll up our sleeves and get it done. Nobody else is speaking up about this problem going on in the way that we are. Many people are ignoring it, turning a blind eye, just getting on with life. And I understand during the pandemic, that seems to be the major issue. Just being, it's nice that society is opening up a little bit because everybody was living sort of like a cocoon, and it's not very good to live like that. But at the same time, we got to realize we have an issue of anti-Semitism that we have to deal with, and we have to meet it head on. So we can't escape it, and we can't turn a blind eye, and we just can't say I have no time to deal with it. No time is a horrible excuse. You do have time. Everybody has time. Everybody has a little bit of time. Everybody puts their little bit of time together. All of a sudden, there's a lot of time there, and there's a lot of stuff we could do. I think our doctor in the studio is motioning that there's another video to show some more excellent information.
Well, there are dozens of videos. Let me see what we have keyed up while you keep chatting.
It's also, there's an issue, the Toronto District School Board, that you have various teachers that want to teach BDS in the school system and want to honor the founder, in fact, and this is on a document, of the American Muslims for Palestine, another hate group, Hatim Barzem, who calls for an intifada in North America. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. No kidding around. We seem to have been able to stifle the so-called Vote Palestine and expose them to a lot of people out there about what they're all about and who their partners are, and they're all haters, and they believe in, they support terrorists, and the worst of the worst in anti-Semitism. We showed that on a previous show, in fact. But every day there's more challenges.
I think, like you had mentioned earlier, that it's hard for us to fathom as civilized people that when some teenager goes and kills a bunch of people, forgetting that it's Palestinian, it's Jewish, it's Arab, it's Zionist. I mean, that this is encouraged and cheered, and that's what the children learn. This isn't a new video, but it shows celebrations after a just terrible attack on Israelis. It's party time. It's incredible.
Yeah.
We're used to celebrating accomplishments by our children. Music and art.
That is the guy, Zakaria Zabidi.
Yeah, right there. So that's a great shot of him, to show. And it's interesting also the whole concept that we know of mob psychology. So these 6 hardened terrorists serving life in prison, they're real tough in prison with their colleagues and other Jew haters and Zionist haters and Western civilization haters. But it was interesting to see what they looked like being caught. They looked like helpless little starving puppies. And they don't want to disclose too much information because we don't want these people killed. But the rumor that's person around in Israel is that they went to some Palestinians, Israeli citizens who are Palestinians, and asked for food and shelter. And instead of doing that, they called the police because we know that there are almost 2 million Muslim citizens in Israel. And, a lot of them want their kids to go to college, want to have a car, want to take vacations. But they're afraid if they say anything, then these guys will target them next.
Yes.
Yeah, he looks pretty tough there with a gun in his back and thousands of people using mob psychology. But again, I'm going to see if I can find a video of them actually being caught. They don't look so tough, when the Israeli police are handcuffing them and they haven't eaten in a few days, and they crawled through, a cesspool tunnel of the bathroom in order to get where they need to be. So you think about it, they haven't showered, they haven't eaten, they couldn't get any help, while the BDS people, the Americans, the Canadians who live in nice homes, drive nice cars, get up, go to work, they're calling these guys, proud martyrs. I'd like to see one of these BDS people go to Gaza and help a poor, struggling Palestinian 12-year-old in Gaza. They can talk really well from their comfortable little TV sets and their social media.
أن يأتي إلى مدننا وقرانا ويمنع العدو الصهيوني اقتحام مدننا وقرانا وقتل أبناء شعبنا دون ذلك فليخرس
You know, last week we showed that video of the woman who masterminded the explosion at the pizza parlor. Well, she's really tough living in Jordan, you know, pleasantly from her air-conditioned, heated home with a full refrigerator. But you know, that's what they do. They delegate. You know, they don't die. They watch the children die. And as we all know, Golda Meir said that there'll be peace when they love their children more than they hate ours. And sadly, we've been hoping about this for 70 plus years. It just isn't happening.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. If this was a movie, we would think that it's fiction.
Right.
The other thing I never understood about these groups is they take their automatic rifles, and I mean, I know I use guns. You shoot them up in the air. Don't they realize those bullets have to fall somewhere? I mean, shooting straight up in the air. I just wonder. I would like to see a clip someday of them shooting, you know, maybe 17 rounds from a 9mm up in the air. Some of those got him in the head and kill him, but again, they won't report on that. They'll drag him away, take a picture, and say the Israeli police did it.
Exactly.
Anyway, so back to you. I'll show another clip of those being arrested, how they didn't really look that brave and that tough.
No, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, totally. It's you know, I don't see a bunch of Palestinian Israelis jumping up and helping this guy, and all of a sudden, you know, he's by himself. And I think that's what he realized. Same thing as in Nazi Germany. It was easy to be a Jew-hating Nazi taking advantage of slave labor when, you know, you had guns and we didn't. But all of a sudden, when confronted one-on-one, they're not so tough. It's like the Toronto rally where Zaza, you know, suffered considerably after being beaten up by 20 people. Trust me, any 2 or 3 or 5 of those guys wouldn't have had any match against Zaza. But of course, they work, you know, strength in ignorance and numbers is their whole modus operandum.
You know, in the next show that's coming up next week, Sunday, I think we're going to have some people from Israel join us on the show as well. But what's interesting is that there's articles coming out now that Yasser Arafat was famous for saying when he was alive that they're going to defeat Israel through the womb of the Palestinian women, and he was encouraging Arab women to have 10 to 12 kids, and he said 2 for the family and 8 to 10 for the Palestinian cause. And that demographic threat or nightmare that he thought that he had it over Israel, that's going to be the future, is according to demographers today, and according to, in fact, Arab demographers. That there's an article we'll highlight in the next show, but Arab demographers are now saying Israel won the demographic war. Israel is here to stay as a Jewish state. They cannot defeat Israel. And now what's going on, they're totally frustrated. They know that Israel is here to stay. They can't come to terms with it. They have to continue to praise those who want to destroy Israel, want to engage in violence, want to develop suicide bombers. There's something else going on too, that in Israel, the population stats that came out, and when it's Rosh Hashanah, the day before, all of a sudden Israel, they say what the population now is of Israel and the Jewish population, what the trend is going on. Well, there's almost 7 million Jews living in Israel right now. But the trend is also that far from becoming more of a secular country and away from Jewish tradition and the Torah, more and more Jews are embracing the Torah, embracing their heritage. And what that means, that when the Jewish identity gets stronger in Israel, that when you see that maybe you had some prison guards, for instance, that are asleep at the switch or really maybe not into their job. when you replace them with those who understand what it means to be Jewish and a Jewish state as well, and love the Torah and love their heritage, there's a motivation there to preserve and cherish the Jewish state and to
So if
keep
you want to, as an introduction, we could show
the enemies.
just as an introduction, talking about what we're going to talk about maybe on Sunday. We do have a little 5-minute clip, which if when you're ready to kind of close up shop for the night, because I think it's worth people seeing who are watching now, and these people who are watching, perhaps you could.
Is that with Yoram Ettinger?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful.
It's interesting. I'm sure you recall, and I recall, 30 years ago, we all were really concerned because the Arab Israeli citizens were having a lot more children than are the Israelis. Well, I got to, brag for a little bit. My cousin who lives in Jerusalem, he has a son and 7 daughters. Well, and we forget how many grandchildren. And, we forget, Netanyahu's out. But that's because nobody can get a majority. Netanyahu still, to this day, is going to get more votes than anybody else. And the other thing we see is that the Palestinians who are the terrorists who live in Israel, their children don't grow up to take over because they die in suicide attacks, or they die, by Hamas, or they die to their own hands. So I do think this video may be a good introduction.
Excellent.
Next week. So it's about 5 minutes. So I'll bring it up.
Perfect.
I'll bring this video right up.
It's excellent. Now, this show, we bring you up to date with everything that's important. Weekly.
How many times have you heard the term Arab demographic time bomb? Usually, it is mentioned in the context of urging Israel to make dramatic concessions to the Palestinians. For decades, we have been told that should Israel refuse to retreat from the mountain ridges of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state, it would lose its Jewish majority, facing an existential threat. Is that so? In 2021, Israel benefits from a Jewish demographic momentum. For example, in 2020, the number of Jewish births was 68% higher than 1995, compared to a 16% rise in the number of Arab births from 1995 to 2020. In 1969, Israel's Arab fertility rate was 6 births per woman, higher than the Jewish fertility rate. However, in 2019, the Jewish fertility rate was 3.09 births per woman, compared to the Arab fertility rate of 2.98 births per woman. The increase in Israel's Jewish fertility has reflected high-level optimism, patriotism, attachment to roots, collective responsibility, frontier mentality, existential threat, and a declining number of abortions. In addition, there is net immigration, which includes Jewish immigrants, aliyah, and a reduction in annual emigration. 14,200 emigrated in 1990, compared to some 7,000 annually in recent years. According to data issued by the Palestinian Authority and have been embraced without auditing by the Western establishment, there are 3 million Arabs in Judea and Samaria. Really? 500,000 overseas Arab residents who have been away for over a year are included in the Palestinian census, as evidenced by official Palestinian documentation, contrary to international regulations. The number grows steadily due to birth. 350,000 Arab immigrants from Judea and Samaria are included in the Palestinian population census, notwithstanding the substantial annual Arab net emigration since 1950. 350,000 Jerusalem Arabs and 100,000 Judea and Samaria Arabs who married Israeli Arabs and received Israeli ID cards are doubly counted by Israel and by the Palestinians. their number expands daily due to birth. A 32% artificial inflation of Palestinian birth was documented by the World Bank in a 2006 audit. The Palestinian fertility rate, number of births per woman, as well as the fertility rates in all Arab countries have been swiftly westernized. The number of Arab deaths in Judea and Samaria has been systematically underreported, as documented by the 2007 Palestinian census, which included Arabs born in 1845. According to the aforementioned documentation, the actual number of Arabs in Judea and Samaria is 1.5 million, not 3 million, 50% below the official number. In conclusion, in 1897, there was a Jewish minority of 9% in the combined area of Judea, Samaria, and pre-1967 Israel. In 1947, it was a 39% Jewish minority, which expanded in 2021 to a 68% Jewish majority, benefiting from a momentum of fertility and net immigration. Therefore, anyone who contends that there is an Arab demographic time bomb relies on highly inflated Palestinian numbers, ignores the Jewish demographic tailwind and the Arab demographic westernization, and therefore is either dramatically mistaken or outrageously misleading.
For more information, please visit theedingerreport.com and or send an email to yoramtext@gmail.com.
He's excellent, and he was a former Israeli ambassador to the United States as well, and he knows the facts. He's been on top of this for quite a few years, and it's really refreshing. So that's it. The BDS, total failure, complete anti-Semitic hate group, and we head into Yom Kippur. You cannot give any space for those who support the BDS. To those who are anti-Semitic, you can't. As a Jew, it's a horror to do that. It's against Judaism to help anyone in the BDS. Looks like there's something coming up from the studio.
Yeah, I just learned how to add background music while you're talking. While you were talking, I just figured out. So, we could do classical ambient. I didn't know I could do that. So, hey, learn something. So for New Year's, now when you hear music, when it gets a little quiet in the background, I'll just put on some music. Back to you.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, we've covered some information. We're going to have a show next week, Sunday, and we'll promote it as well. Not exactly sure what time we're going to be doing it. We might do it a little bit earlier in the day because we have some guests that are going to join us from Israel. We'll figure out the timing, and we'll let everybody know. But it should be a terrific show. There's a lot of information we got to give you, as well as when we have the guests on from Israel, and we want to know the situation in Israel and living in Israel also. That's the ultimate goal for all Jews, to be in Israel, at least to have 1 foot there and 1 foot out, even if that's the situation, because you just can't plant yourself there completely. You have to be attached with Israel. So going forward this year, but on that show also, we'll be discussing threats as well. We're never taking our eye off the threat. Every single day, there are more threats. We find out about this, we're on top of it. We got a lot of work to do. So our job is defeat the BDS on campus. That's their goal right now, to recruit and inspire for hate and anti-Semitism and support for terrorism. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. They worship these terrorists. They're heroes to them. Those terrorists recruit children to be suicide bombers. It's horrific. This is serious. And Israel is winning. The Jewish state is winning. and the future is great for Israel. We still have what to do about those who are Jew haters. We have what to do. We have our work cut out for us. But Israel's here, and Israel is the future. We have a song to show.
Of course. Now, not only do we have a song to show, I think we're going to start a new trend. We show a song, we do an intro, extra. If you recall, for a couple of weeks ago, we did the Mensch on the Bench. We found that there was the first time ever in Australia's history that an Orthodox rabbi was appointed. So in looking at that, I came across somebody else. I'm just going to introduce, because you'll see his relationship to the song. But this is our Mensch of the week for today. And from now on, we'll call it Not to Mention It. Okay, so so Israel Now's Mention of the Week. So this Rabbi Benji Levy, who I'd never heard of, he's an Australian Israeli Orthodox rabbi. He's big on social media. He's an educator. He's an author. His background is amazing. In 2021, he co-founded a group called Israel Impact Partners, which partners with philanthropists all over the world to try to contribute so that he could help educate the younger Jews to become Zionists, to become more observant. I mean, it's not a Jewish proselytizing organization. We're looking to give better insight to Jewish children. He had previously served as a CEO of Mosaic United, which was a partnership between World Jewry and the State of Israel, again, to strengthen the identity for those who are aged 12 to 35. Internationally. He previously served as a dean of Meir College, which Meir College is the largest independent Jewish school in Australia, 1,800 students from pre-K to 12. So now I'm going to play you a little music that he's responsible for organizing, and a little introduction. This is 1,000 Jewish children singing together. So without any further ado, and after this, we'll go to the closing line. Do you have any final words in closing? Because after this, I think we'll close it on down. Good to go?
Well, prepare yourself for Yom Kippur and have an easy fast, everyone.
I think you'll love this.
Albie, I've been learning with people for so long, in so many different classrooms and settings. But to be honest, the one thing that connects to everyone is song. And therefore, for my final class, I want to ask you to lead us as we sing a beautiful song.
Shalom